I was reading this article the other day about toxic relationships, and it was pretty eye-opening. I mean, who knew that something as seemingly harmless as a relationship could actually be so toxic? Have you ever found yourself stuck in a toxic relationship that drained your energy and left you feeling emotionally exhausted? It's a place where communication breaks down, trust is eroded, and boundaries are constantly violated. Imagine being stuck in a cycle of negativity, where every interaction leaves you drained and emotionally exhausted. This is the challenge of toxic relationships. They can be with a friend, a family member, even a colleague. No matter the form they take, toxic relationships can leave lasting effects on our mental and emotional health. Here in the UK, domestic abuse and toxic relationship conflicts are unfortunately all too common. In the UK, it's estimated that around 2.4 million adults aged 16 to 74 have experienced domestic abuse in the past year. That's like 5.5% of the whole population, which is pretty staggering. And get this, almost 2/3 of those facing abuse are women. Plus, statistics show that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men will experience domestic abuse at some point in their lives. Did you know that in nearly 1/3 of households affected by partner abuse, there are kiddos under the age of 16? It's a pretty sobering statistic when you think about it. Imagine how scary and confusing it must be for those little ones to witness or hear about violence happening at home. It's an issue that needs some serious attention and support for those going through it. It's an issue that affects folks everywhere, not just here. So what makes a relationship toxic? It's when the balance of give and take shifts dramatically to one side. It's when respect and understanding give way to manipulation and constant criticism. It's when you feel trapped, unable to express your thoughts and feelings without fear of reprisal. It's when you walk on eggshells, constantly trying to avoid conflict or criticism. It's when the person who should be a source of comfort becomes a source of stress. It's tough dealing with these situations, but there are ways to cope and grow from them. These relationships can leave us feeling drained, anxious, and even depressed. They can chip away at our self-esteem and make us question our worth. But here's the thing, it's not about us, it's about them, their insecurities, their need for control, their inability to deal with their own issues. But how do we handle these relationships? How do we protect ourselves from this constant onslaught of negativity? How do we break free from this cycle of emotional and mental exhaustion? How did Jesus deal with the toxic people? In Matthew 16:4, Jesus did something that might surprise you. He called the Pharisees and Sadducees evil and adulterous and walked away. These religious leaders had demanded a sign from heaven, trying to trap him with their test. Jesus didn't stay to argue or try to win them over. He set a clear boundary and left. But this wasn't his only approach. Jesus also sent away demanding crowds and showed mercy to his betrayer Judas. Picture this scene. Thousands of people had pressed in for 3 days, seeking food and teaching. They came wanting miracles and healing. They wanted to see amazing things happen. But after Jesus fed them, something unexpected occurred. In Matthew 15:39, scripture says, Jesus sent away the crowds. But why would the loving Savior do this? He healed their hunger. Then in Matthew 15:39, sent them away, protecting his mission. He didn't invite them to stay longer. He didn't set up a permanent camp. Instead, he chose to send them home. The crowds were becoming demanding and focused only on what Jesus could give them. They wanted more miracles. They wanted more free food. They wanted entertainment. But they weren't really listening to his teaching. They weren't growing in their faith. They were consumers, not followers. Jesus recognized when people were draining his energy and mission focus. He saw the difference between those who came to learn and those who came to take. The crowds were pulling him away from his real purpose. They were making demands on his time that would hurt his ministry to the disciples. Like the crowds, we can drain our spiritual leaders. So let's learn Jesus' wisdom in saying no. Jesus protected his time with the disciples who were truly learning and growing. These 12 men needed his attention. They were asking real questions. They were changing their lives. They were preparing to carry on his work, After he left Earth, Jesus knew the difference between people who wanted to use him and those who wanted to follow him. The crowds wanted benefits. The disciples wanted transformation. The crowds wanted comfort. The disciples wanted to become like their teacher. Jesus shows us that love sometimes means saying no to protect what God has called us to do. His decision wasn't mean or selfish. It was wise and necessary. He knew his mission required focus and boundaries. This teaches us that we can follow Jesus' example when people drain our spiritual energy. We can love people while still protecting our calling and peace. But what about when the toxic person isn't a stranger in a crowd? What happens when betrayal comes from someone close to you? Knowing Judas would betray him, Jesus still kept him close. Why? Most of us would cut that person out right away. We would protect ourselves. But Jesus did something different. John 13:2 tells us Jesus knew Judas's heart. He knew what Judas was planning. He knew Judas would hand him over to be killed. But Jesus still chose to keep Judas in the inner circle. He still included him in meals. Jesus gave Judas every chance to change his mind. This seems to go against everything we think about protecting ourselves from toxic people. We're told to avoid people who hurt us. But Jesus shows us a different way. A way that seems backward to our human thinking. The most powerful example comes at the Last Supper. Jesus washed Judas's feet. This was a humble act of service. Jesus got on his knees and cleaned the feet of the man who would betray him. John 13:12-17 shows us Jesus washing the feet of all his disciples, including Judas. He showed love to someone who was planning to destroy him. We can follow that same humility today, even when someone hurts us. Jesus didn't try to control Judas or force him to be loyal. He respected Judas's free will. Jesus could have stopped the betrayal. He could have exposed Judas to the other disciples. He could have sent Judas away, but he didn't. He let Judas make his own choices. Jesus protected the other disciples by not letting Judas's toxicity spread to them. He kept his mission focus clear. He didn't let one toxic person ruin the whole group. The other 11 disciples continued to grow and learn. They weren't poisoned by Judas's bad attitude. Jesus maintained his mission focus despite having a toxic person in his closest group. He knew his purpose was bigger than one person's betrayal. He kept teaching. He kept healing. He kept preparing for the cross. One toxic relationship didn't stop God's plan. Jesus shows us we can love toxic people while still protecting our hearts and calling. We can be kind without being naive. We can show grace without being foolish. We can care about someone's soul without letting them destroy our peace. But what about when toxic people aren't just betraying you quietly? What happens when they're actively trying to trap you with their words? The Pharisees and Sadducees constantly tested Jesus. In Matthew 22:15-16, they plotted to trap him with his own words. They asked questions that seemed innocent but were really setting snares. They came to Jesus in Matthew 16:1, demanding a sign from heaven. This wasn't a real request. They weren't seeking truth. They were testing him. They wanted to trap him. They hoped he would fail their test. Instead of endless patience, Jesus sometimes chose to walk away from these encounters. We might expect Jesus to keep trying with these religious leaders. We might think he would answer every question. But that's not what happened. They asked for a sign. He replied, "No sign except Jonah's," then departed, refusing to play. In Matthew 16:4, Jesus called them an evil and adulterous generation and left. He didn't sugarcoat his words. He told them exactly what they were. Then he walked away. Jesus recognized when people weren't asking genuine questions but setting traps. The Pharisees could read weather signs. They knew when storms were coming, but they couldn't see the spiritual signs right in front of them. They had hardened their hearts. They had already decided to reject Jesus. Jesus didn't waste time trying to convince people who had already hardened their hearts. He knew their motives. He saw through their fake questions. He understood they weren't really listening. They just wanted ammunition to use against him later. Jesus protected his energy for people who were truly seeking God. He had disciples who needed his teaching. He had crowds who wanted to learn. He had sick people who needed healing. He couldn't waste time on people who were trying to destroy him. We too can walk away when others twist our words. Jesus teaches us that we don't have to stay in every argument or prove ourselves to everyone. Some people will never be satisfied. Some people will always find fault. Some people just want to fight. We can follow his example by recognizing when people are trying to control or manipulate us. When someone twists our words or sets traps, we can choose to walk away. We can protect our peace and energy for people who truly want to grow. But how do we balance this wisdom with Christ's call to love everyone? We've seen 3 different responses: saying no to consumer crowds, loving a betrayer, walking away from bullies. Let's extract the heart principles. Jesus shows us a pattern of wisdom we can follow in our own relationships. He didn't treat every toxic person the same way. He made different choices based on what each situation needed. The first principle is compassion that protects mission. Jesus fed the crowds, but sent them away when they became demanding consumers. He knew his purpose was bigger than any one relationship. He couldn't let toxic people stop God's plan. He kept his focus clear while still caring for people's souls. The second principle is humility without naivete. Jesus washed Judas's feet, even knowing he would betray him. He showed love to someone planning to destroy him, but he didn't try to control Judas or force loyalty. He respected free will while protecting the other disciples from toxicity spreading. The third principle is praying from a distance. Jesus walked away from the Pharisees after calling them evil and adulterous. He didn't waste time on hardened hearts, but on the cross, he prayed for his enemies. John 17:9 shows Jesus prayed for those who harmed him. Love doesn't require physical closeness. Jesus always acted out of love, even when he created distance. When he sent away the crowds, it was love. When he walked away from the Pharisees, it was love. When he let Judas make his own choices, it was love. Distance doesn't mean hate. Sometimes distance is the most loving thing we can do. Walking away doesn't mean we stop loving or praying for someone. We can love people and still protect ourselves. We can pray for people and still keep our distance. We can hope for their change and still guard our hearts. These things aren't opposites. They work together. God sometimes calls us to love people from a distance for both our protection and theirs. Distance can give toxic people space to think about their actions. It can help them see what they've lost. Sometimes our distance is what they need most. We can trust that God will work in people's hearts, even when we need to step back. God's love is bigger than our presence. His power is stronger than our efforts. When love and boundaries work together, we mirror Christ, protecting our calling and caring for souls. You don't have to choose between protecting your peace and following Christ. When Jesus sent away crowds, walked away from traps, and let Judas make his choices, he was showing us perfect love. Love that protects. Love that sets limits. Love that says no when needed. Ask God for wisdom to know when to engage and when to step back. Trust that He will guide your heart. He knows each situation. He sees what you can't see. He will show you the right path. Ask God today to reveal one relationship that needs healthy distance and one where you need to show more grace. You have Jesus' model. Walk forward in freedom and love.
In Jesus' presence daily.